That kingdom, of course, is Jesus Christ. And we know that Jesus Christ comes on the clouds for the rapture. Okay, so that's very cool. I thought, okay, so let's go back to look at these 7 heads, and let's go back to your paper here, and we're going to do a little bit of drawing today. So if you have some colored pencils, great. If you don't, that's okay. We'll still be able to be just fine. You know what? I'll pull this in the middle here. Okay, so let's take a look at this. We know that the 7 heads we just represent, and what Daniel saw in chapter 7 and what Nebuchadnezzar saw, the vision he saw in chapter 2, they represented 7 kingdoms. And that's what the 7 heads of the beast look like. The 7 heads on the beast represent 7 major kingdoms of the world. And not just the kingdoms, but the wicked characteristics of those kingdoms. And their history and still our future are embodied in this one man, the Antichrist. So we see, so these are the 7 kingdoms. We see the idolatry of the Egyptian kingdom. We see the cruelty of the Assyrian or Mesopotamian empire. The Mesopotamians, when they conquered a people, they impaled them, they crucified them. When they conquered the Israelites, they shaved their heads, men and women, and then had them walk naked in chains connected through their nose, one to another. Walk all the way back to the Asian Mesopotamian Empire, which is like hundreds and hundreds of miles. So they were extremely cruel. And then we see the Medes and Persians, the strength of the Medes and Persians, because it was such a large empire and they combined the Medes and the Persians together, they had a huge, huge, huge army. And then we see the speed of Alexander the Great as a leopard. The Medes and Persian is represented as the bear, very strong. The speed of Alexander, because he conquered the whole world plus in a very short lifetime. And the violence of the Roman Empire, which we know of from the crucifixion of Christ. The Romans were very violent, very intolerant. And then the deception of the beast empire. And both the Roman Empire, which the beast comes from, they are both represented as a fierce beast with iron teeth. And that information I got from, if you look up Understanding Revelation online, you can get an explanation by Jack Kelly. So so you've got 2 little spaces there. It says the dragon from Revelation 12 has 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns. Let's take out your pencil and let's draw that over there. So what we're going to, this is why you're going to see why I hired an illustrator to do the illustrations in my book. This is my idea of a dragon. Okay, and then he's got 7 heads. So we're going to draw some lines here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those are his necks, and these are the heads. And if you are a better artist, you can make your picture real pretty. Okay, and so this is the dragon from chapter 12. And here we see the dragon has 7 heads, and it says, and then we're going to draw on 7 crowns. And from what we just read from Daniel, we know that those 7 crowns are represented by 7 kings. So each one of these heads gets a crown. Okay. And then it says that this dragon has 10 horns. Well, we know, and we'll look at some more scripture in a little bit, all 10 horns are on this one head. So draw in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 horns are all on the 7th head, the 7th kingdom. All 10 horns are on. So this is the dragon, and he ruled over through men. Remember, Satan can't come down here and rule the world by himself because the rulership of the earth is given to man. So men are ruling, but dragon, Satan, influences the world through the minds of wicked rulers. Or even sometimes, we can be, as Christians, influenced by wicked thoughts that come into our head if we don't take the thoughts captive and, dispel it with Scripture or switch the screen of our mind. So Satan can influence Christians just as well as evil people. So anyways, Satan influenced the 7 kingdoms of the world, which we just listed, were the Egyptian kingdom, the Assyrian kingdom, the Babylonians, the Medes and Persians, the Greeks, the Roman Empire, and then an offshoot of the Roman Empire is the last kingdom, which is the Antichrist Empire. Okay, so that's where now, chapter 13, we're going to take a look at how is chapter 13 listed differently from what chapter 12 says the description is. So now, we're going to draw another dragon over here. I'm going to draw him down here. We're going to draw another dragon over here. And it says he's got 7 heads. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so 7 heads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this head I'm going to make really huge, 7th head, because that's the one we want to focus in on for the moment. Okay, so the 7th head we're going to make really huge. Now it says that it has 10 horns, and we know from this picture that all those horns are on the one head. So we're going to draw 10, and we might want to spread these out a little bit more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 horns. So that beast has 10 horns. And we know that these other heads had crowns. So you can go ahead, because all these other heads had kings and kings. So you can go ahead and put these crowns on these other heads too. Even though it's not listed, we know that these kingdoms had kings. And now it's telling us in chapter 13 there are 10 crowns, and in your notes put 10 crowns on the horns. So in your notes down here at the bottom, put 10 crowns on the horns. Okay? And that's what we're going to do. We're going to take and put crowns on each one of these horns. Okay. So this is what we are told in chapter 12, and chapter 13. This is the beast that we're seeing coming out. So the beast in chapter 12 has also 7 heads. So it represents all the previous kingdoms, as we have listed up here, all the wicked characteristics of the 7 kingdoms that came before it. And it's 10 rulers that are going to rule the world. It's got 10. So that's what, isn't that a cool picture? I thought that was a cool illustration. Of course, I didn't have my illustrator do it. Okay, page 5 of your notes. Revelation 12 describes Satan the dragon and his historical and future world kingdom. Chapter 13 represents the wild beast that's released from the abyss at the 5th trumpet. And we also know that Satan transfers his power to the wild beast. Satan transfers his power to the beast right before the exact middle of the tribulation. Because the beast, how do we know what happens before the middle of the tribulation? Yes, he goes for 3.5 years. What else do we know? What happens in the middle of the tribulation that's very traumatic to the Jewish people?
They'll close the temple. No more sacrifice.
Yes, the Antichrist closes the temple, no more sacrifices and worshiping to God. At the exact middle of the tribulation, the Antichrist breaks the covenant with the Jewish people, sets up an image of himself and declares himself God and declares everyone to start worshiping him. And so how do we know these 10 horns are all on this one head? How do we know they're not dispersed here? Well, that's a great question. Glad you asked. Let's take a look at Revelation 17:12. And Carmen, can you read that in your notes on page 5? Kind of a third of the way down, Revelation 17:12.
The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast.
Okay, so we are told right here in chapter 17, the 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. So that's how we know these 10 horns are on this last kingdom. The last kingdom is the Antichrist kingdom, and it says they receive authority the same time the beast does. So the only way they can receive authority the same time the beast does is they have to be during the beast's kingdom, the Antichrist kingdom. So that's how we know all 10 of these horns are on this head and not evenly dispersed between the other kingdoms. Okay, and we see that the dragon gives the beast his power. Yvonne, can you read Revelation 13:2b from your notes?
And to it the dragon gave his power, and his throne, and great authority.
So once the beast, the wild beast, the king of the abyss, comes up from the abyss at the 5th trumpet, then the dragon gives the beast his authority, his power, and his throne. All the power and authority that Satan had, he gives it to this man. He pours it into this one man. Exactly how that's done, haven't got a clue. But he does do it. So all the powers and intellect and magic tricks, that whatever that Satan does, that he's able to do because he's a powerful, immortal, fallen angel. He gives all of that to this beast. So you can imagine what this beast is like. So it's almost as if we've got literally, I mean, this guy is definitely Satan's man on earth. And let's read Revelation 13:3. Daisy, is it your turn? Your turn to read.
One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast.
So as we're reading chapter 13, we're learning about the beast, and it says one of its heads received a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. So this beast suffers a mortal wound. Let's look up, and you don't have to look it up, it's right here in your notes, Zechariah 11:17 at the bottom of your page 5. And Roberta, can you read that for us? Zechariah 11:17, nice and loud.
Woe to the worthless shepherd, the sword shall strike his arm and his right eye. His arm shall be completely withered, and his right eye shall be totally blinded.
Okay, worthless shepherd. The beast, the Antichrist, he sets up a covenant. Remember we talked about this several times? He signs a covenant with the Jewish people at the beginning of the tribulation saying he will protect them, he will be this, that, and the other thing for them, and they can have their sacrifices in their temple. So instead of the Israelites, instead of relying on God for their protection and worshiping God, they now look to this man, the Antichrist / beast, for their protection. And so they betrayed God, and then, so this is, he's like a shepherd over the flock of Israel. He's the leader of Israel. And in Zechariah, we were given the prophecy, woe to the worthless shepherd. The sword shall strike his arm and his right eye. His arm shall be completely withered, and his right eye shall be totally blinded. You know what this sounds like? Sounds like somebody tried to shoot him in the head. Okay? Because it tells us his right eye. Now, because back in those days, and probably God, for whatever reason, didn't want to reveal that to us, we know that the right side of the brain controls what part of the body? The left, yeah. Yeah, so we know the right brain. So we're told he's shot in the right eye. So he's shot in the right eye. And so somebody comes up to him and boom, right in the right eye, shoots him in the head, so his right eye is totally blinded. When you get a headshot right here to this part of your head, and it'll go to the part of the frontal part of your lobe, usually what happens, a wound like that would leave someone dead or in a vegetative state in a coma on life support. But this person, this Antichrist, the beast, comes out of the coma, is normal, just like in the Hollywood movies. Someone goes in a coma and then all of a sudden they wake up and they're perfectly fine. If you've ever known anybody who's been in a coma, Jeanette and Pat and anyone in the medical field, how many people have you known in a severe coma due to a head injury and awake and they're fine? Doesn't happen. No, doesn't happen. I have a brother who suffered a severe brain injury. And I won't go into the details of it, but yeah, he was in a coma for 3 months. He was in rehab for 2 years, paralyzed on one side of his body. He eventually got, his one side of his body was able to move again, and he can walk and ride a bike. But his stride, his gait is a little off. And same thing with his hands walking. It's not quite smooth because he had to really learn everything. Every motor skill he ever learned, how to feed himself, tie buttons, everything. Had to learn it all over again, and his memory, his short-term memory does not work. And his long-term memory doesn't work at all either. I mean, things he knew long before the accident, he remembers some of it, but it really messed with his memory, his speech, and his ability to think and process. So, but what we see here, just like in the Hollywood movies, we see this guy, he comes out of the coma and is normal, just like in the Hollywood movies, and anyone in the medical field. I mean, they thought my brother was a miracle, the doctor said when he woke up out of the coma and came back to the emergency room that he was in ICU for 3 months. They said it was a miracle, just the fact that he was alive. They said he had a 15% chance of surviving to a vegetative state. So, and usually most families will pull the plug on somebody like that. Nobody wants a loved one, but some people don't. So if you don't, that's your value, that's fine. Okay, but anyways, so it's possible that at this point is when the beast possesses the body of this man and takes over his body of this man, and he becomes the beast, this Antichrist, and he obviously takes over the whole world at this point too. But another scenario could be that this man who is to become the Antichrist, when Satan is looking over the people and he's choosing his one man to be inhabited by the beast, it's possible that he already had undergone some DNA changes, and that the beast already possessed this man's body. So when he was shot in the head, all it did was nullify that person's personality and soul, and that beast took over, his body and ruled from there. Because the shot to the head, number 6 here, could be this man already had undergone DNA changes and was already possessed by the beast, and a shot to the head through his right eye did not stop him at all. And why we see the people of the earth worship the beast in Revelation 13:4. And Annette, can you read that out of your notes?
Out of my notes.
Page 6.
And they worshiped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?"
Okay, so we see that this guy's shot in the head, and he's got a severe head wound, but yet he comes back to life and he's perfectly fine, and everybody's like, oh, he must be, he's immortal, he's invincible, and they see that he's got all this power, that Satan, so they worship Satan and they worship the beast. So, and as we know right now, the Luciferian elite are looking for the man that Satan is going to rise up to rule the world. They are looking for him right now. Europe has been talking about a new world order for at least a decade. It's on their radio shows. If you take a cruise with them and go on vacations, they're always talking about, you always hear stuff about the new world order. And there's also a lot of talk about an economic reset called the Reset, and our current president is talking about that a lot too. With the election of our current president, he is moving our country in the direction of this new world order. And if you want to look at that stuff, go on the internet. and look at the Great Reset. You can even find, it's called The Great Reset. You can look on the internet and you'll find out all their manifesto of what they want to do. You can either read it straight from the elites of the world that have written it, or you can find it also on prophecy channels where they talk to you about it. But it's out there, and they're planning on setting it into place. When they first wrote it, they thought they were going to set it into place in the 2020s. So they're looking to move in that direction, and they're already working with chips that you can put in your hand that will allow you to have a bank account, so you can go and buy food, you can do business, you can get medicine, and all these chips they're trying to connect right now along with the satellites. They're putting chips in cars, in your computers, in your toaster, in your refrigerator, your air conditioning, so that they can hook everything up. So if you don't go along with them, now that's not going to happen while we're alive, but we see that's what's been prophesied for the tribulation, where no one can buy or sell or do anything without the mark of the beast. So we see the technology for that being created already. They're working on that. And then we know that after the rapture, the world is going to be a chaotic mess, and one man will rise to the forefront. So that's talking about that little horn that comes up. So we have these 10 oligarchs that have all this money and control major portions of our world economy and lifestyle. And then you've got one man that's going to rise up, and in his rising up, the oligarchs are going to either not agree with him and get wiped out. We don't really know exactly what happens to them, but 3 of them are just not going to be anymore. And that person that rises to the forefront right after the rapture, that person will be the Antichrist. We'll never know who he is. We won't be here. We'll be raptured before that. Okay, let me see. Let's see. And at this point, by the time we get through to the 6th seal, remember the 6th seal, we've got the sun turning black, the moon turning blood red, we've got tsunamis, tossing of the sea, we've got earthquakes, we've got lots of famines, and then all of a sudden about 2 billion people disappear across the face of the earth. So that's going to affect industry in general. You're going to have a lot of trains, planes, buses, and cars crashing at that moment, and people are going to be in a panic. So at this point, the world will be looking for a Savior to take away the trouble and the wrath of God that they've been exposed to. And when they see that this man who's risen to the top gets shot in the head and just comes back to life, they're going to say, oh my goodness, he promises, he's lying, promises to make everything better for the world. And the Antichrist/beast will display miracles, and he will deceive the people and even call himself God. Thus, they will worship what their eyes can see and what their minds have chosen to believe. They've rejected Jesus Christ. They believe in mankind and how mankind can save the world, and they see science and technology, which are this generation's new gods. If you see that, if you look at our kids, they're constantly on their little phones or iPads, or they can't live, they'll tell you, without their phone. You take away their phone and you might as well have just cut off their right hand. They feel like they can't live without that technology. And so science and technology are this generation's new gods, and this Antichrist embodies it all, because he'll have control of all the electronics. Okay, let's read Romans 1, 18 through 32. Who's next to read? Jenny, is that you? Annette, I had you read, right? Okay, Jenny, can you read that for me? Romans 1, 8. Ginny, did I have you read yet? Okay. Okay, Romans 1, chapter 1, 18 to 32. This is a long section. You know what? Everybody turn to it. We'll each read a verse. So everyone turn to Romans chapter 1, verses 18 to 32. Romans chapter 1, verse 18. Romans chapter 1. Start at verse 18. Romans chapter 1, start at 18.
All right. I'm here. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness, and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness.
Okay, yeah, just one verse at a time. Do we not see that in our world today? So much deceit is going on. So much lying in our news that we've seen. I mean, it gets worse and worse every day. A lot of lies, and the truth is suppressed. If you put something on that's conservative and truthful, they'll wipe it off. Nope, you're not going along with our agenda. You can't post what you want to post. So this very verse we see happening right now in our day. Go ahead, Barb, next verse.
For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them.
And Christy?
For ever since the creation of the world, his invisible nature and attributes, that is, his eternal power and divinity, have been made intelligible and clearly discernible in and through the things that have been made, so men are without excuse.
Yeah, when you look at the heavens, when you look at creation, when you look at a lousy little bug that's in your house that you don't want, you look how complicated that little bug is, you know, and then there's bacteria, healthy bacteria and bad bacteria, but we need the healthy bacteria. And when we look at human beings and how complicated, we did not evolve from evolution. Even back in the 50s, the major creators, Watson and Crick, of the DNA molecule back in the 50s, one of them was a mathematician. He said mathematically it's not possible for evolution to have occurred on this earth. It would take too much time to make that many changes over generations to come up with the complexity of life that we have today. So it's been known for 70 decades or more that evolution doesn't work. But of course, a lie, deceit, they've been teaching it. You know, so none of us, or hardly any of us, are probably in our 70s yet. And so that's how long they've been teaching this lie in our schools. So, so we're full of lies over here. And yes, we should know by looking at creation that there was a creator behind it. It did not happen by chance. Okay, next verse, Amy. 4, 18, 19, 20. Okay.
Yes, they knew God, but they wouldn't worship him as God or even give him thanks. And they began to think up foolish ideas of what God was like. The result was that their minds became dark and confused.
Dark and confused, they became fools is what happened. They didn't want, and you know what? Also, many Nobel Prize winners throughout the years, I remember I was in college in my 20s, and one of the Nobel Prize winners from the past, from the 60s or 70s, had said, you know, I don't believe in evolution. I know it doesn't work, but I don't want to believe in God, and evolution is the next best thing that I could. So that verse, can you read that again? Because that is so poignant. They chose, go ahead and read that verse again.
Yes, they knew God, but they wouldn't worship him as God or even give him thanks. And they began to think up foolish ideas of what God was like. The result was that their minds became dark and confused.
And that's they came up with the foolish idea of evolution. They didn't want, or they came up with, and in past empires have come up with, you know, different gods that they made up that they wanted to work, like the god of, you know, the birth and the rebirth thing. That all started with Nimrod, the very first kingdom, the Sumerian kingdom, which eventually grew into the Assyrian kingdom. But yeah, that whole religion that is the basis of all of the Egyptian religion, of the Medes and Persians, of the Greeks and the Romans, all their gods, started with Nimrod right after the flood. Nimrod is the great-grandson of Noah. And so that religion, the false, was started all the way back then. So all the generations have not wanted to worship God as God because their hearts were dark and they were wicked. Ginny, can you read the next one for us?
22.
Yes.
Claiming to be wise, they instead became utter fools.
Ah, indeed. And that's what we see when we look at these ideas that they've come up with. Utter foolishness. Okay, Jeanette, sorry.
And exchanged the glory of their immortal God for images made to look like a mortal human being and birds and animals and reptiles.
And we see that in all the ancient religions. Okay, Pat?
Therefore God gave them up to uncleanness
Yeah, so I'm sorry, could you read that last phrase louder? I couldn't hear it.
Therefore God gave them up to uncleanness through the lusts of their hearts to dishonor their own bodies among themselves.
Okay, so they had lusts and they dishonored their own bodies, and God said, okay, I'm letting go. Go ahead. You can dishonor your own body. And we see that in the LGBTQ, whatever, T movement that's going on right now. Soon to add a P, because they want to add pedophilia to their list too. They're working on that. The mental health AMA part of mental health part of AMA is trying to get pedophilia not listed as a as what?
Not as a crime.
Yeah, not just not as a crime, but just as a disease. It's not immoral, and they're trying to get it listed as a disease, because now homosexuality is a disease like alcoholism, and it's not something you can be persecuted for or looked down on society for, or told that you need to change if it's a disease. Okay, Daisy, you're next.
They exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshipped and served created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised. Amen.
Okay, yes, and that's exactly what we see going on right now. Our laboratories are creating, throughout the ancient empires, they created all kinds of statues and worshiped the birds, and we have a lot of religions that worship the land or the earth. We still have that today, and worship created things instead of the Creator. And today, our scientists across the world don't want to worship God. They don't want to humble themselves before God. They don't want the love of God. They want to rise up and learn how to become immortals on their own strength. And so they're creating their little robots in the laboratories. They're mixing DNAs of different plants and animals, and now humans. They're imparting plant DNA and animal DNA and implanting human DNA into animals and into plants. So they're really trying to make their own creation. And we're going to see a movie today, and those of you who are at home looking at this, we're going to watch a movie today called Hybrids, Super Soldiers, and the Genetic Apocalypse. And so if you can get a hold of this to watch it, I'm not sure if it's available on YouTube or on Subnet, but they're going to talk about the details of what our scientists are doing today. And you know what? We are going to... We'll wrap it up. We'll just wrap it up here. Oh wait, let me finish this thought. Okay, so Romans 1:25, they exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and worshipped and served the created things and the things they create rather than the Creator. And we read about that back in a couple weeks ago when they took a piece of wood and made an idol out of it. Some of it they cooked their food, some of it they used to make a knife, and then the rest of it they made a little idol and bowed down to it. And so they've been worshiping their things that they have made. In Isaiah 44:20, Yvonne, have I had you read yet? Can you read that?
He feeds on ashes. A deluded heart misleads him. He cannot save himself, or say, is not this thing in my right hand a lie?
Okay, and that's talking specifically about that verse where the person takes a piece of wood and uses some of it to cook his food, another part of it to make something, and then the last part of it he makes a bowl to eat his food out of, and then he forms an idol out of it. And is this thing in my right hand a lie? And this can also be extrapolated to go along with the chip that people are going to have in their right hand or on their forehead. Is this thing that's in my right hand a lie? The chip that they're going to receive during the tribulation, the mark of the beast. Isn't this thing a lie? So we can extrapolate that from it too. And Carmen, Jeremiah 16:20, can you read that?
Do men make their own gods? Yes, but they are not gods.
Yeah, so do men make their own gods? Jeremiah tells us, yes, they do, but they are not gods. And then we'll stop right there, and we'll leave 2 Thessalonians 2, 1 through 12 for where we leave off, and start there next week.